How are things at our rival escape room?
They're great and filled with COVID. I had COVID, and I spent most of the last week watching 6-hour YouTube recaps of Danganronpa, and because that's the only thing my brain could really process at the time. What was weird was like I was really trying to max relax, all cool, and I just kept getting these text messages from you, Brian.
From me?
And you, Josh. And our friend Greg. That just said Brian has a boo-boo.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Yeah.
No,
I do. Yeah.
You know what I had? COVID!
COVID could be considered a form of boo-boo when you think about it. Like when you really think about it.
Yeah. Wow. AJ, you don't understand. Like I kind of like cut my finger right like where the corner of the fingernail grows, which makes it like it really wasn't that bad, but it's a little funny. It feels funny still.
Yeah, you know what else feels funny? My brain, because I still have brain fog, and one thought may connect to the next. We'll see.
So many possible worlds, but we got this one. So many possible worlds, but we got this one.
Welcome to the worst of all possible worlds, the first and only podcast where one thought may connect to the next. We'll see. I'm the worst of all possible Joshes.
I'm the worst of all possible AJs.
And I'm the worst of all possible Brians.
We are so excited to have you back here with us for another delightful week.
Today we are digging up that lost classic that's not lost at all. In fact, they just put out a remake very recently. The LucasArts adventure game, Day of the Tentacle.
Yeehaw.
This game is basically an urtext for my entire sense of humor. I played this game when I think I was maybe 6 or 7 years old. It was like one of the first things I played after playing like the Humongous games, which, you know.
The Humongous games?
Yeah, the Humongous Entertainment edutainment games. So Pop goes to the moon, Pop goes to the zoo, those sort of things.
Okay, yeah, I gotcha.
Did you play those, Brian?
I don't know if I ever played Putt. What we had on like the school, I mean, I didn't have a lot of computer games. My parents were always worried that like putting games on the computer would break it, or they would like buy a game and it didn't fit the specs. Buying games for computers back then was especially confusing.
It was a real gamble.
That's true.
Yeah, just very disappointing all around. Much easier to get consoles, which we also didn't have for a long time.
My mom was very scared about consoles because she was just like, every video game that you play has to have a purpose. You have to be learning something from these video games. So I was stuck in like the Jumpstart 4th grade, Jumpstart 5th grade track, the Math Blaster track, because she was just like, if you're going to be spending time in front of a screen, it should be towards towards your education. And these were sort of snuck in there in the cracks. So I played things like Day of the Tentacle and The Dig, which was very informative for me. Yeah. And this game this game was like I replayed this game I think 6 or 7 times in a row. Like it was I would purposefully like not solve puzzles and just like exhaust dialogue trees just because I wanted to hang with my friends.
Yeah.
My experience with point and click games as a kid was definitely in that edutainment tradition, but it was on computers that we had at school, so it was all almost universally Magic School Bus.
Same games that Microsoft made back in the day.
Yeah. So like it was with those, it was point and click on stuff, but there wasn't necessarily like a cohesive thing that you had to get all the Magic School Bus kids to do, right? You didn't have to like find a certain object, combine it with another one, make sure that Carlos makes a joke so bad that it will, knock someone out or whatever.
That would be amazing.
Carlos. But you click on things and you observe them and you learn little facts about them. And that was basically my experience with that kind of stuff until I was a teenager and started subscribing to there was a British magazine called Retro Gamer that would include demos of old ass games like Steel Sky, stuff like that. And those were the games that I played.
And Brian, you never actually played Day of the Tentacle before we did it for this episode,
No,
right?
I had heard of Day of the Tentacle. I knew it was a sequel to Maniac Mansion. I had played neither of those games. I haven't even played the old Monkey Island games, to be honest
I haven't
with you.
either.
So I'm kind of
it's a
halfway
huge-
between the two of you because I grew up playing Humongous Games, which, of course, was a studio comprised of people who came largely from LucasArts.
Yeah, Josh,
so
did you ever play Fatty Bear?
Absolutely. Fatty Bear, Putt Putt, Pajama Sam, Spy
Fatty
Fox.
Bear. He's preparing
all
for
of
that
it.
birthday. Where's he going to get that banner from? It's under the stairs.
He's got to bake a cake. I have
Got to bake a cake.
I have
He
to bake this
absolutely has
cake
to.
for Kayla's birthday party.
I'm the AJ of this episode. I have no idea
I know,
what's
it's
going
great.
on.
It's great. I think when I was like a teenager, I started getting into the like full-blown LucasArts adventures. So
Indiana Jones? Any of the Indiana Joneses?
not indie, but I did play the Monkey Island games. Really love Curse of Monkey Island, as well as Full Throttle and, of course, Day of the Tentacle. So going back to this game for me, this was the first time that I played this game probably in 10 or even 15 years.
Yeah.
So there was definitely some memory of the puzzle design and the puzzle structure in my head of like weird things that I just remember because like, what the fuck? And we'll get to that. But with that said, some of this was totally fresh again. And I had a lot of fun with it. Oftentimes on this show, we talk about just absolute dire shit like last week when we did God's Not Dead. So it's kind of fun to be back in the realm of something that's actually entertaining and enjoyable.
Kevin Sorbo, actually, I found his performance to be more convincing than any of the like actors he was paired with. So the movie's whole point about him being a hack was actually disproved by his performance being better than everyone around him. So
yeah, it's a low bar though.
I know it's a low bar, but I mean, when in that movie you have to find something to cling on to. I had forgotten about the racism entirely.
Yeah. AJ's also a big Reddit atheist, you know, watches Bill Maher every week, you know, so like that.
Look,
that's
he tells it
convincing
like
to
it
him.
is. Well, he's not afraid.
Look, in this moment, I am euphoric because we get to talk about Day of the Tentacle. And there's no better place to start than by talking about the historical background behind LucasArts, the company that made this game.
Yes, it is now known as Lucasfilm Games as of 2021.
Oh, like it used to be called.
Wait, I thought it was gone. I thought it dissolved.
No, Disney rebranded it because they want that sweet reboot money. They're seeing the success of things like the remaster of Day of the Tentacle.
Oh, and just like Disney, LucasArts, or Lucasfilm Games as it originally was, is now, but wasn't when this game came out, is also named after a guy. That's also a last name, right? Lucas?
Yes.
Yeah,
like a filmmaker?
Yes,
that's
perhaps
true.
a filmmaker behind some sort of war in the stars.
I've heard of this Lucasfilm studio. Apparently, they're real up and comers in this space.
Yeah, real indie. I think they're really gonna make it big someday.
They are really indie, actually.
Yeah. Lucasfilm Games was founded in 1982 because by George Lucas himself. By George. George Lucas wanted to expand beyond the movie industry, just as Episode 6 was hitting theaters. Right, he was wrapping up his trilogy. He was like, I want to expand beyond this. We've invented all of this technology to make all these graphics for film. What if we like actually put that towards like the burgeoning market of computer games? So LucasArts, as we know it, is actually a spin-off of the Lucasfilm Computer Division, which had two factions within it. The Computer Games Group, which would go on to form LucasArts, and the Graphics Group, which would later become Pixar.
Yep.
I did not know this.
Turns out George Lucas is kind of an important guy. You can laugh at it because he's not always the best filmmaker, but like the dude's a pioneer, right?
Well, and that's the thing about George Lucas in general that a lot of people don't seem to understand is the reason that he succeeded is not on the strength of his artistic vision, although he certainly did have an artistic vision. It's on the strength of his entrepreneurship, because this is a country that rewards people who know how to do business. You know, we talked about that with the example of Citizen Kane, where Orson Welles was just really good at getting people's attention and doing deals. Yeah. Similar situation here with LucasArts, where this started out as just like a little game studio where it's like, hey, let's play around with this nascent medium of games and see what happens. And over time grew into a bigger and bigger property within Lucasfilm.
But they were doing wild stuff in the 80s. Just like truly cutting edge shit.
Interesting, because Star Wars already had video game licenses, right? They couldn't actually make a Star Wars game or an Indiana Jones game at the beginning because they were licensed out.
Right, Atari had the rights to Star Wars.
Right.
You know,
Atari.
That's a great game, by the way. The arcade cabinet, original Star Wars.
So they just took that revenue that they were making from these licensed Star Wars games and were like, well, let's just try something out. Let's just make a game. And so the first game that they made is one that people may not actually be aware of. It was called Ball Blazer. I'll say she is. That one came out in 1985 for the Atari. I think it was just called the Atari 8-bit. I can never keep my Atari system straight. There's too many of them.
A lot of numbers.
They released another one called Rescue on Fractalus.
Whoa.
Where you're on Fractalus and you're rescuing some stuff.
Like we've played this game. We all have deep knowledge of Fractalus.
We all love this game. Yeah,
we're all fract heads here.
Yes. If you're a fract head, sound off in the comments.
Yeah. So those games were 1985. Then we get to 1986, and they actually licensed a movie that George Lucas was executive producer on, Labyrinth.
Right.
And it's a graphic adventure like a Sierra game. But unlike a Sierra game, it does not use a text parser. You are scrolling through your options and clicking on those options the same way that you click on the stuff on the screen.
Right.
Yes.
So they would continue to expand on this concept. And their first, I think, really true big hit, other than Labyrinth, which was pretty successful, was Maniac Mansion.
Yes.
Maniac Mansion comes out in 1987. Big breakthrough technologically, because now it is a fully graphical adventure. You are pointing and clicking anywhere you want to go.
Yeah.
It's also the first LucasArts game to be released on MS-DOS.
Yes.
And this game is built on something called the Script Creation Utility for Maniac Mansion, or SCUM. SCUM is the engine that is going to power all of these LucasArts games all the way up through Curse of Monkey Island in 1997.
Yeah.
And was the same engine used to power the Humongous Entertainment games.
You could really say that LucasArts was a hive of scum and villainy.
You could say that. You definitely could say that. It was this SCUM technology that allowed LucasArts to really leapfrog Sierra in the adventure game space, because Sierra were the first pioneers of this stuff with King's Quest and stuff like that.
Yeah, and Torrens Passage. Anyone play Torrens Passage? There's a part in that game where you have to climb along a rock wall, and if you don't climb in the exact way, you fall to your death.
Yeah, and that's the Sierra game problem. They're all bullshit.
Exactly. And this is also the other major advancement that LucasArts was able to make through their game design, because in Maniac Mansion, you can still lose. There are ways that you can lose. There are ways that you can die. But from basically the 90s onward, from the beginning of the 90s onward, the LucasArts philosophy is that you can't do anything in the game that through trial and error will just cause you to fail. You cannot get locked out of the game or not realize, oh God, I clicked this one thing and now I can't get back into here because I did this thing. Instead, it's about how do we make the games work in such a way that the player has complete control and can try as many things as they want without being afraid of the consequences.
Yeah. So talking about Maniac Mansion in particular, this was a game that was sort of based on early 60s, late 50s cheesy sci-fi, right? You have this meteor that lands and it takes over kind of the minds of the people in this house. You have these walking tentacles who live in the house who are sort of little Igor type characters. You are selecting from a list of verbs. Now, this game still has some of this old school design that when you look at the 90s, this doesn't exist. But when you go further back, you have it a lot where there's multiple endings. You can play as 3 characters and you're switching between the 3 of them out of 6. So you have all these other characters who have different abilities, who have different puzzles, but you do have occasional deaths or imprisonments. And you have something that we refer to these days as soft locks, right? Where you might just do something, have no idea that it has done something bad. And instead of a death where you could just reload your save because it's over, you can just get to a point much later in the game where it's no, you tore that envelope open the wrong way and you tore up what was inside. So fuck you.
Brian, did you play this game? Did you play Maniac Mansion?
I played a little bit of it. It's too much at the top. I couldn't wrap my head around it. But I was watching some keynote speeches and listening to some interviews.
Did you listen to Ron Gilbert actually talk about it, the creator of the game?
Yeah, he does a really great talk about it. And he talks about those lost situations just came from a lack of QA. They didn't have any testers, right? It was just like 2 or 3 guys making it at Skywalker Ranch, playing through it and being like, oh, here's a fun idea for how we could make a new system. Let's put a hamster in the microwave, et cetera, et cetera.
Well, and it's the point of QA or lack thereof. Like, it is hard to overstate just how small of a market computer games were in the mid-'80s.
1987? I mean, come on.
You could sell 1,000 copies and that was a hit. 10,000 was a smash, you know?
And one of the things that made Scum work so well is that you could port really, really easily.
Right.
You didn't have to change the engine around. It was mostly just figuring out how to shift things on the graphics. And the most popular version of Maniac Mansion was not the original Commodore 64 version. It was the NES version. Which looks way worse. But like, if you go to YouTube and you watch people doing Let's Plays of it, it's the NES version.
Yeah, speedruns too. It's a favorite in the speedrunning community for some reason.
I watched a speedrun of Day of the Tentacle. Somebody did it in 20 minutes. And I'm just like, and actually, I think the new record is 15, and it was done by a German man. Okay. And because this game is huge in Germany, which we will absolutely get to. Yeah. Basically, it takes 6 years for Day of the Tentacle to get made after Maniac Mansion premieres. In the interim, they do Monkey Islands 1 and 2, where Gary Winnick and Ron Gilbert, who were the original creators of Maniac Mansion, bring on 2 young upstart writers named Tim Schafer, who you will know if you know video games of any variety. He created Psychonauts. He created Psychonauts 2. He created Broken Age.
Brutal Legend.
He's one of the more reliable comedic writers in the field too, or comedic directors. Like you know when you're going to play a Tim Schafer game, even something like Broken Age, you know you're going to be playing a game that is pretty funny. I think Brutal Legend is a very underrated game, and it's got great performances, and it's a very funny.
They brought on Tim Schafer and Dave Grossman, more like Dave Gross.
Already
fuck. They thought that their sense of humor would actually lend itself well to Maniac Mansion, and whether it was just sort of their innate sense of humor or it was because they worked with them on 2 Monkey Islands in a row, that like they just created this sort of shared language of comedy. Who's to say? But basically, they set out to make a game that was as close to a Chuck Jones cartoon as possible.
And I will say, too, that shared comedic sensibility carries through into the Humongous games, too. Yeah. Because Ron Gilbert left after, I think it was Monkey Island 2, to found Humongous. And if you go play those Freddy Fish games, holy shit, there are a lot of Tim Schafer style jokes in there, even though Schafer was not working on those games.
And it's worth noting that Gilbert is not working on Day of the Tentacle. It started with his like pitch. It was like, hey, LucasArts, like this is the next thing that we want to do. But then he went and started his own studio and put these 2 guys in charge.
They all sat in a room together, all 4 of them, and they cracked that they wanted it to be like a time travel adventure. And that was kind of it. And then he went off to do Humongous games.
June 25 of 1993, Day of the Tentacle was released for PC. Up until this point, adventure games, people have been having fun with them. You know, you've got the Monkey Island games, you've got Loom, stuff like that. Different sort of sensibilities. The thing that Day of the Tentacle is praised for doing so effectively is building this really impressive cartoonish world that just feels like you're stepping into a Saturday morning cartoon. And this is the thing that the reviewers are constantly praising about it. It's just the wit and the clear love given to this world building.
And it was a highly collaborative process making it too. Like they would just walk around the office and be like, hey, even people who weren't even working on Day of the Tentacle being like, hey, so we're in this situation with this puzzle. How would you get out of it? And they'd like pitch something and be like, great. And they would take it and run with it.
They called those pizza orgies. Remember, this is still the old days of video game design, kind of sausage fest. They would invite people over from other parts of the studio, and I think from even outside the studio, but people who were not working on the game, but who weren't necessarily QA testers either.
Sure.
And they'd sit them in the living room, have them play a section, and then just see where people were like, I don't know what to do now, and figure out like, how do we make this more elegant? How do we communicate the solutions or the hints at the very least across to people a lot better? It's a very important thing. It's something that we do in the escape room industry too. Josh just did a test last week for something that we were running. It's like, where are people running into walls? Where are they not getting the story? What can we do to change that?
This collaboration actually like goes into the code of the game in a very interesting way. There is a random number generator that determines which one of the 2 directors gets top billing.
Oh, that's fun.
Through multiple playthroughs, it'll switch up every single time, whether
between Dave and Tim
on that card,
between Dave and Tim.
Again, Brian, this was your very first playthrough.
Yep.
AJ, this was your 10 millionth playthrough.
Yep.
This was, I think, either my second or third playthrough, but my first in at least 10 years. So Day of the Tentacle begins with a beautiful... it's what is it? It's Peer Gynt, right?
No, it's the other morning song. It's from William Tell Overture.
Right. Okay, William Tell. Yes. And
they
panning
talked about
over.
that. They talked about that in the commentary for the game.
Oh, really?
They're like, there's two things you use to convey morning. One is William Tell, and one is Peer Gynt. Yeah.
And so we hear that, and we're panning over this house in this pastoral landscape, and there's a bird that flies on by, and then the bird starts choking, and we see that there's this river, and sludge is just being pumped into this fucking river. And as we look at the river flowing with sludge, two tentacles, a purple tentacle and a green tentacle, appear from behind a tree, and we hear this.
Oh, I'm coming.
I'm thirsty.
I don't think you should drink that.
He drinks it.
It looks bad for you.
Nonsense. It makes me feel great. Smarter. More aggressive.
It's so loud.
I feel like I could.
So he starts
Like
transforming, right?
Right,
Purple Tentacle begins freaking out.
Yes. So dumb.
Like I could.
And then he grows two little arms.
Teeny tiny little arms.
Take on the world.
Lightning in the background. Green Tentacle is shivering in his suction cup.
Yes.
So this is the original audio.
The good audio.
Some of these sound effects are quite loud in the mix. Some of the music, this music sounds fine. Some of the music I thought was very grating in the original audio. When you play the remake, the remaster, or whatever it's called, it's very modular. You can play with the modern graphics, with the original graphics. You can play with the modern interface, or the original interface, and with sound effects and music switched out, whether it's old or new. The modern graphics don't look great to me. It looks like it just went through an AI upscaler, and I don't know if that's actually the case, but that is what it looks like. It feels indistinct. The graphics of the original just pop. Like all the elements of them stick out. You know which things you're supposed to interact with. You know what your characters are. They have a real dimension to them, even if they have a low pixel count.
Well, and it is a low pixel count because these early LucasArts adventure games have a resolution of 320 by 200 pixels.
So many
Hey there, you are listening to a preview of a premium episode of The Worst of All Possible Worlds. If you'd like to listen to the rest of this, head on over to our Patreon. That's patreon.com/worstofall. And you can listen to not only the rest of this episode, but our entire backlog of premium episodes, bonus episodes, and if you subscribe at the $10 tier, you will get an extra episode of the podcast every single month. Again, that is patreon.com/worstofall. Hope to see you there.